Good morning, everybody. How's everybody feeling? Excited? Ready for day 2? All thumbs? All right, cool. We're going to go ahead and get going. So thank you very much for showing up for the first session of day 2, bright and early, 9 a.m. This is Thinking Big, Scaling JSS Infrastructures for the Mobile Workforce. All right, we got a few people I want to introduce. So first, we have our guest panelists, Ben Toms, if you want to, there you go, Ben, raise your hand. All right, Jahan. We have Andrew Segal, who joined us last night. Ben actually volunteered Andrew, and Andrew was nice enough to agree to join us as well. We also have some Jamfs on stage. So we have Mike Paul, we have Tom Larkin, and we have Amanda Wolf. Some of you may know Mike from classes, Tom from being very verbose on Jamf Nation and other places, and Amanda for also contributing extensively to Jamf Nation. So there may be some names that you're familiar with. So before we get too far into this, this panel and this QA, I know everybody has questions locked and loaded, ready to go. I want to real quickly define something. Actually, I don't want to define it. I'm going to let Wikipedia define this. Just talking about what scalability is. So scalability is the ability of a system, network, or process to handle a growing amount of work in a capable manner, or its ability to be enlarged to accommodate that growth. There's a couple things that I think are interesting in that statement, and it's really talking about growth of a system. I know in today's day and age, a lot of organizations are looking at how they're dealing with these new devices or an influx of these Apple devices in their environment. It's a great problem to have. So a lot of the questions I suspect are going to be around that scalability or that growth. All right, so we're going to do an open Q&A. I have my assistant Josh here, who's going to be running around with the microphone. If you have questions for the panel, what I'm going to ask that you do is just please raise your hand. Josh is going to get to you. There's a good amount of stairs here, and Josh might have to run down and around, so please be patient. But just raise your hand if you have questions. We'll get to you, and you'll be able to ask your questions. If you don't want to raise your hand and ask a question on the microphone, there is also a Jamf Nation discussion going. So if you go into the Jamf Nation user conference page and take a look at this session specifically, what you're going to find is the discussion is available for you there. If you want to ask questions there, I'll be checking those questions as we're going throughout the session, and we'll be able to get those questions asked for you as well. All right, so you guys don't want to hear me talk about the talk. We want to get to an open Q&A. So Josh is going to run around. Who wants to release the opening salvo of a question about scalability? What questions do you have in your environment? What's just been nagging you? Anything you want to get to?
Thanks, Josh. Hi. My name's Richard. I'm ex from University of the Arts London. I had a question about network traffic. Imagine the situation where you've got multiple different remote sites and you have a local JSS at each site. How much network traffic is going between that and a database server?
Tom? Step on up.
Hi, I'm Tom Larkin. So the question was, I guess, like how do you assess that data and scale accordingly is what you're looking for? So really there shouldn't be a lot of traffic from a client to the JSS. The only thing that a client does is it just checks in and grabs basically XML data, which is really tiny. But during like an upgrade, and let's say you're a global infrastructure and you have thousands of clients, during an upgrade, a client will check in and grab software. So the binary, self-service, that stuff, right?
JSS, the database, not client the JSS.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, to database. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Long night. So even then, to that point, like the database is actually probably going to be your biggest bottleneck, and it's not going to be the network traffic. So it'll be like, how long does that query take, or how long does it take to get to that data? And I would say, like, actually probably fine-tuning your database is going to be a bigger concern over the network traffic from the web app to the database.
Haven't we found it makes more sense to one centralized JSS as opposed to
I know, I was
remote
just
JSS?
getting to that too. Yes, good point. And the other thing that Mike just brought up is that ideally it's probably better to have all your web apps in your database probably in the same area, and not have web apps scattered across like the globe, right? So that way everything's centralized, hitting one cluster of web apps. You have a load balancer appliance in front of it or something to that matter, and that.
Sorry, so what you're basically saying is while you could do a star topology, it would not be the best practice. You would suggest having a centralized cluster.
I would, yes, for sure. Cool.
Anyone else?
Oh, there we go. We have one in the back there, Josh. I love the teamwork. Perfect.
Thank you. In a large global distributed environment, under what circumstances would you want to have multiple Tomcat interfaces, servers?
Well, when it comes to multiple Tomcats, it doesn't necessarily matter how spread out you are. It has a lot more to do with how many concurrent connections you want to maintain, and how many clients you have, what the check-in rate is on the clients, how often they run recon. So I would say, even for redundancy, it's always a good idea to have more than one Tomcat instance, just in case you have a problem. But would say over 1,000 or a couple thousand clients would probably start being a pretty good idea to look at whether or not you should start balancing the load.
Could we get just a real quick example of maybe what are you looking for? How many clients do you have? How frequently do you have those clients checking in? Maybe we could get a little bit better answer for you.
Yes, the environment I'm working in, we've got about 1,000 clients North America, 100 APAC, 300 Europe, and we've got two separate JSSs, and so we're merging the two together, and we're going to split Tomcat and SQL on two separate boxes. But I'm just wondering, I'm hearing about other places where they've got more than one Tomcat instance, and I'm just wondering, first, how do you evaluate when one is being overwhelmed? Because that's not my my background. And then if you had a second or a third, what's the justification, or what is the rationale for doing that?
Okay. Well, a good thing to look at is how long the recon's taking for submittal to the JSS. How long, if you're running self-service, how long it takes when you click the button for something to start happening. Then reports. A lot of times what I've used as a baseline myself is an all-computer search, because that's pretty intensive. You just give me everything. While during peak times. And peak times change based on your organization, and definitely change based on where all your clients are in the globe, right? But to have more than one Tomcat, what you have to keep in mind is that you have to have something to be able to make sure that it has the same DNS name. So you either need to have a load balancer or a round robin DNS or something, so that the clients always think that they're talking to one DNS name. If you have that, and if you're going virtual, or you just have extra servers or whatever, I would always recommend going with more than one. But it depends. It sounds like it's something for each environment, really. It's just keeping an eye on when things start getting slow, or when you think there's going to be a large amount of new computers being enrolled.
Yeah, and actually I'm going to jump in real quick on that one. A couple firm things to take a look at. Definitely page load times, query times are going to be some good things to take a look at. Another thing you want to monitor, or at least keep an eye on, are two other things now I'm thinking about it. The number of connections that you're having, concurrent connections at any given point in time. There's a few different ways that we can track that. One of the ways that I like to track is by checking the connections from Tomcat to MySQL. We're also going to want to monitor the connections to Tomcat itself. That can be a potential bottleneck, if you will. The other thing that you want to monitor that oftentimes can be related to the slowness could also be the amount of RAM that each instance of Tomcat has available to it. So the amount of RAM that you allocate, just monitoring, are we getting close to that allocation level? A couple different solutions we have there. If we can increase resources to that server, we can go ahead and do that, and then also allow increased connections to Tomcat. So those are kind of some hard things that we can take a look at, just to get an idea where the server's at. If we find that we can't allocate any more RAM to it, we can't allocate any more connections to it then as well, then we might want to start looking at adding additional clusters for a Tomcat server. So, yeah. John?
So what we found in terms of monitoring, especially, we use Logic Monitor so we've got it on a VM, and adding the JMX query settings so that you can monitor your Tomcat using Logic Monitor, then it can send you alerts when the load is getting crazy or the RAM is running out or stuff. That's what we were running into initially. We kept like running out of RAM, the thing would crash, and at first when we didn't have Logic Monitor in there, we didn't know what was going on, and so that, using a tool like that really helps a lot.
Awesome, thank you. All right. Awesome, thank you.
No worries.
If we could really keep the questions going back and forth, I think that would be sweet. Josh is gonna have a great time with that.
Come on down.
There you go.
Hey there, do you consider the cloud-based instance a viable option for scalability? If so, what is the upper limit? Is there an upper limit size-wise? And also, can you please go into your patch manager or Casper's, Jamf's patch management philosophy with cloud instances?
Hi, first-time talker. So it really depends, but we can scale. We have some deployments on our hosted services that are, what the largest is, we're getting up to 100,000. So yes, we can scale it out as much as it goes. We actually have a bunch of different monitoring services and a bunch of other things going on that, as we see a greater load, we will add more Tomcat instances and scale that out and give it the resources it needs. We do heavy monitoring on all of the stuff to accommodate whatever we are sending at that. So it is an actual viable option for scale. We actually have a dedicated team that will monitor resources and scale it accordingly and handle all the other stuff with it. And the same idea with your talk about the patch management for us, we will handle the upgrades of both Tomcat, the JSS, any of the other security options there as well as they come out.
So as they come out, is there a choice? I mean, you know what I mean?
That's actually another very good question. Depending on, we have either dedicated hosting or you're part of, I forget the actual correct verbiage. Shared hosting. So there's different schedules with it. Dedicated hosting, you have your complete choice of the upgrade schedule of everything else there. Shared hosting, you are working with other hosted stuff as well, and there is a published schedule that you would get let known of during that upgrade process, what we're going to and everything else, and it would happen at scheduled times ahead of time. So it's not just, they're not throwing at you, but if you went to the straight dedicated hosting, you do have the discretion of how that goes. But we will give you recommendations, say, we need to do these patches. This is what's coming out.
Right behind behind you.
Right in the middle.
Right behind you.
Hi, are there any drawbacks to clustering? Like any performance hits specifically to MDM?
So the question was, is there any drawbacks to clustering? And the biggest drawback is probably the level of support. So now you're supporting multiple web apps, and you own multiple web apps. And maybe you don't, depending on your organization. Maybe you're just an application owner and your data center guys own multiple web apps. But there's probably way more benefits when you get to a certain scale and you want certain things, like if you want high availability, failover, stuff like that. Maybe someone tosses out the term business critical. I've heard that a few times. That becomes kind of a need almost. And you'll be able to, like Dusty was saying, you'll be able to track a lot of the metrics. Like what I like to do is I like to do like a show full process list in the database. And it'll tell me at any given time how many connections I have from each host name of each web app. And that kind of gives me an idea when I engage with Jamf customers on, hey, these are your peak times. These are the connections we're seeing per Tomcat. And then we can go to Tomcat and be like, okay, these are your max threads. Here's your, how much RAM you gave to Java. And you can kind of scale it out to where, yes, when you hit your peak time and you hit or you have to hit the big red button or something like that, like your end users don't know, your clients don't know, and your infrastructure just handles it. Same time?
Good.
So that's, okay, yes. So Mikey brings up a good point. We do have, yeah. And now it's the next pain point, actually, yeah, perfect. Mikey says synchronizing between web apps. So if you if you have more than one admin and they're hitting like the load balancer, for example, to log into like the web GUI, it could be possible that you're doing something that doesn't show up on their web app right away. By default, we synchronize 60 seconds across the board between web app and web app for that kind of information. Generally, what I recommend is you disable your web apps and only have one admin console, period. And that way, you're only in one actual web GUI. And then upgrades is what Sego said. And upgrades are a bit more of a pain point because you have to down every Tomcat and update the master first. And once the master web app is up and running and healthy, then you can bring up and upgrade your child Tomcats. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks.
You're cheating.
My question's actually kind of a follow-up, and it fits in very nicely. Our JSS has expanded significantly over the last year, and we've worked with our support rep and with posts on Jamf Nation to scale up the resource allocation and max threads and stuff like that in our JSS in a clustered environment. But what we've started noticing is that with rapid release of, say going from version 9.3.2 to 9.4 to 9.5 to 9.5.1 to 9.5.2, those changes aren't being kept. I'm just wanting to make sure that that's an intended purpose, if that's working as intended, or if that's a change that could potentially be made.
Yeah, go ahead.
That actually is not normally intended behavior. We do have a couple of issues that we know about where specifically Tomcat settings are not being saved between upgrades. Generally, because I like to err on the side of caution, even without that issue in play, I like to back up just the whole Tomcat folder before doing an update, just in case if something goes wrong, if something gets mangled, if the installer doesn't go through, if you lose power in the middle of it, anything like that, you at least have a backup of your Tomcat folder so you don't have to redo the threads, the memory allocations, your certificates on occasion. But yeah, that's definitely not intended behavior. It is supposed to save those settings between the upgrades. Development and QA are aware of that, and I'm not sure where it is on the list. I actually don't have my lists up in front of me, but that is one that they're definitely aware of, and it's one of their priorities to get that taken care of, because it is definitely not supposed to wipe your settings out between upgrades.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
So we also have that same problem, and I think it's related to the way Tomcat was installed initially by the server admins prior to our jumpstart. And just recently I found the manual install process or upgrade process is way easier. You don't have to go back and edit all your Tomcat settings, and it saves me a lot of time. So look that up.
2 thumbs up from support.
If you don't have any questions, I'm going to have to start talking again. All right. Awesome. We have one right down here.
That's right. So I have a quick question.
Yep.
So when we're going to upgrade our JSS, like we're going to go to 9.6 soon, you suggest to do it the manually way instead of just using the installer? Is that what I just heard with your 2 thumbs up?
We do like that way.
Just to get these on the mics real quick, the question was, in a situation where we're looking to upgrade the JSS, was the recommendation to do the JSS upgrade as a manual upgrade or using the upgrader installation tool?
Either mostly works. The manual upgrade we tend to find is just easier in the sense that you drag the root.war file, replace your other one, there's your upgrade. And people who are using operating systems that our installer doesn't run on are really used to that. It's really decent for Windows. You avoid some of the issues with the installer, especially if you're running antivirus on your Windows server. Manual installation's easiest for that. The installer is, by and large, for the operating systems it's tested on and that we list it for, it should work just fine, outside of that one particular current issue that we have. But either way actually is just fine. It's kind of whatever you're more comfortable with. The manual upgrade can be, I don't want to say faster because the installer is pretty fast as well, but it's a little bit faster because it's kind of a drag and drop, count to 5 and you're done sort of deal. The installer might take a minute or 2. But it kind of, going back to the it depends answer that nobody likes, it does really depend. It depends on what you're more comfortable doing. It depends on, like I said, in Windows environments, we tend to recommend it more often than not because with antivirus and the way we do know, our installer has a couple of stumbling blocks on that and it may cause it to fail, but it doesn't run into that with the manual one.
Thank you.
An add-on to that as well, it's good to understand what the JSS installer does with it. So when we actually are running the installer, we are updating the version of Tomcat as well. So that might be a good thing for security reasons and other stuff as well. So it's good to understand that there might be reasons why you might want to do that, so you're getting to an updated version for security standards and other stuff like that. The manual install is quick, easy, and everything else, but at least the installer also does a backup of your entire Tomcat directory. So if you're doing manual, I'd say make the backup yourself then, so you have that, but that's just kind of good to understand the differences there with that. So,
if you want to hang up there real quick, Mikey, one thing I want to make sure that we kind of differentiate here, we're talking about an upgrade process specifically. Mikey, could you speak just real quickly to the difference on a fresh JSS install that you're going to get between the installer-based installation and a manual installation? What things you get or don't get?
Yep, that's a very good question because there is differences. So depending on the OS you're installing your JSS on, a manual installation of Tomcat will vary. So say we take Linux, for example, a manual installation of Tomcat versus the JSS installer, you're going to see some permission differences. So a manual installation, you will see that the Tomcat user doesn't actually have permission to change a lot of things, including the server XML, including the Tomcat SSL key store, different things like that you will run into if you are going the manual way. So if you go manual, chances are you need to do more manual things afterwards. The JSS installer way, permissions are set so that you can do these modifications via the web app and other stuff like that. So there are some pretty decent differences in how that goes as well. We do tweak Tomcat. Yeah, that's another, that's a pain point as well. The JSS database utility that we do for our automatic replication or backup of our database, the other settings in there as well, only comes down with your installer. Now that being said, you can run your installer on any OS. It's the same jar. You can grab that file and throw it on whatever server you want. Currently, it is only available through that. People have asked for it to be a standalone download, so whether you're doing manual or not, that's what we're looking at. But it is the same jar, it works everywhere.
Henry's got a question down here. Oh, sorry.
First and foremost, Mike, switch to decaf and slow down.
Always.
For the three non-Jamf panelists, would you guys kind of step up and go through what your environment looks like? It's just one of those questions that for those of us who are thinking about growing to a multi-server, larger clustered style environment, knowing what you guys have on the back end, what's your SQL server split out to, what are your Tomcat instances, what's your load balancer, that kind of thing. I'm not looking to crash anything, just curious.
So I think I've probably got one of the smallest Casper installs, probably in the room actually. We've got about 230 clients split out globally. So based in London, we've got Macs in Hong Kong and New York, and it works out to be about 9 sites globally. So I'm probably one of the few people also look after Mac Mini server. Anybody else? Yeah? All right, so there's like 10 of us. Cool. So I've kept it quite vanilla. The main thing for us has been the MPLS links between sites, and that's been an issue for us in network bandwidth, and trying to make sure we got distribution points available in every office when you look at bandwidth, and we also need to look at sync intervals for our Casper share. So for us, it's not so much as scaling the JSS, but it's make sure we sync within the timing that suits our environment, because we've got guys in Japan, and Japan's got 1 meg, I think it's a 1 meg connection into our Hong Kong office, which has got a 10 meg MPLS link into London. So you start looking at, deploying CS6, it's not going to be happy. It's not going to be very nice. You don't want to be doing that across a 1 meg connection at the endpoint. So you want to make sure your distribution points and your network segments set up correctly. That's been the big trouble for us. The other thing as well, which I'm sure these other guys will talk about in a sec, I just want to add to it as well. As you get more countries involved, as you get more people involved in your JSS, the problem becomes when to upgrade. So we're a 24/7 kind of company now. We recently bought, recently about a year ago, we bought a company called Canterbury, who are based out of Australia. So there's literally maybe a 2-hour window a day when we're not in office hours, so when are you going to do upgrades? This becomes difficult. So things might change. You might end up doing stuff during hours because that's the only time your support is available. So other considerations to make on that. So it's the scaling part of it for us isn't necessarily the JSS size. It's more of our network side. It's more of our network limitations through, say, an MPLS connection in Japan through to Hong Kong, and make sure we got the bandwidth available. And then as well for upgrades, it's trying to make sure that we can do it in a time that, A, we're around, and B, it's not too detrimental as well to our environment. And that's the big couple of questions. I mean, the main thing as well is obviously with the network connections, if you've got like a network restrictive kind of environment, would be network segments. And they save a ton of time. If you talk nicely to your network admin, and you're talking through all this, when you're at the beginning, you're setting up NetBoot, and you're trying to get the IP helper in, you got to take it for a beer or a coffee or whatever. As it works. This is the kind of thing you talk to them about this, you talk to them about network segments, you talk to them about caching server, you want to manage the bandwidth. And when you start getting friendly with them about this, it does help and does scale, but it can be, the initial couple of steps can be difficult, especially when you do acquire a new company and they have a slow link. So the very short answer to your questions, we use Mac Minis.
Sure.
So we have about 15,000 clients. I have 6 secondary Tomcats, or child Tomcats instances behind a load balancer, and then one off to the side that's the master, and that's the one that you interact with and you change the policies. All the rest of them have the web apps disabled. All 6 web apps are accessible to clients out in the field, because we have a lot of field reps. Similar scenario with the way that I do my major distribution point. It's also 6 Apache servers behind a load balancer
and a shared file share between all of them that they share that information out on. MySQL is definitely separated out. I leave 8 gigs, there's 8 gigs on each one of my secondary servers, and 6 gigs allocated towards Tomcat, and then my master has 16 gigs of RAM. My MySQL server is ridiculous because we were having issues with having it on our VM infrastructure. Not that MySQL is having an issue, but there was the storage guys just, I don't know. It wasn't dialed in quite right. And so we ended up going with our de facto standard. Here you have a Blade, which had like 137 gigs of RAM, which is just ridiculous. So you don't need that at all. At all. It's awesome, but you don't need it. A good rule of thumb for the database server would be have as much RAM as your database is large, and then plus the OS, and kind of predict. You can see that if you have a reoccurring backup, so that reoccurring backup is not going to be the size that your database is by any means, but you can see the upward tick if you follow that and say, okay, we're getting larger here.
So we're kind of a simpler, I mean, we have 1,100 Macs and about 800 iOS devices right now. So when we did our Jumpstart, we did it all on one box. It's a Ubuntu VM. So no load balancer. MySQL's on the same box as the web app. And it's, at first we were having memory issues. We tweaked the VM settings and got it working pretty well. And now we're getting to the point where we keep, growing and growing and adding more stuff. So we're looking actually at Jamf Cloud because we're already in the DMZ. We've got a DP in the DMZ. We have pretty weak WAN links to our New York office and to our LA office, and we have a DP. In New York, there's not any Mac users in LA right now, but if there were, and then we have the DP in New York is also a NetBoot server, so it's a Mac Mini, and so if we want to have to re-image somebody that's up there, and they don't have to send it back to DC, but that's nothing fancy.
How are you handling distribution of content for your remote workers?
The JSS and the master distribution is in the DMZ. So, but if you have a large, anything that's, a large install, we always cache the installer first before it shows up in self-service for them. And especially for New York and replicating to New York, it's slow. It can take a while, but. Yeah. Right now we're just using distribution points. We have not switched to JDSs yet.
Do you want to?
I see a lot of benefits there. I've been hearing some mixed stuff on, some pluses and minuses. So I want to test first, and I just haven't had, I've been spending all my time upgrading my JSSs recently, so hence the other reason why we want to go to the Jamf Cloud.
And so just real quick, the question on that was whether you're using JDSs or distribution points,
Right.
File share distribution points with web service, HTTP, or what are you
Yes.
using for? Okay.
Yes.
So I just want to say about the JDS stuff. So we haven't used JDS yet. We want some replicated sync at a particular time, and I've bugged a few people about it. We'll see if it happens. But that's just because of our bandwidth constraints. But the point I wanted to make was you want to look at moving to HTTPS distribution. You want to move away maybe from AFP, SMB, if you start to have a distributed environment, so that you've got the resumable downloads. So you deploy a package and a client moves from site to site, it should kind of resume the download, not restart the process, especially if you've got bandwidth constraints. It can be it's quite an easy change, but it might be quite fundamental to the way your architecture is built. But if you're looking at scaling it, for something like that, especially like we've got a DMZ instance as well. So when clients are outside of our network segments, they will hit the DMZ instance. Then it does make a massive difference when you start caching stuff. Even 140 meg download, and someone's on a hotel wireless or something, because you don't know. You just push it out, and you don't realise that they're in Bangkok doing something. It can make a difference to your policies, a difference to the user, and also the fact that it doesn't keep, every time it fails, it doesn't keep trying through AFP and something else as well. So I just wanted to quickly mention to move to that if you're going to be scaling.
Test environment, test environment, test environment, test environment. Always have a test environment. Never make your changes in production first. I can't tell you how many times that's saved me. And it seems like something that you should be like, oh yeah, of course, I need to do that. But no, it's really important. And we have, all of our changes are under change control, change review. So we actually have 3 environments. Engineering has their own sandbox test bed, which is where I live most of the time, which is an exact clone since all mine are VMs. It's a perfect clone of what production is. So I can actually go through this whole production upgrade in the virtual environment to make sure how long it's going to take, which as you get a little bigger, some of these upgrades between JSS versions can take a couple hours. And then you have to start working with support and going back and forth like, hey, what can we do about this here? Yeah, so test environment. And I forgot to mention distribution points. We have distribution points in every one of our sites that has more than 50 people in it. And our de facto standard right now is 2 Mac Minis and a 1U rack mount. So we are also on the Mac Mini train, just because of cost. They were so inexpensive. I'm able to say, hey, for $3,000 US, you get a distribution point, and it's redundant because I sent you 2. So.
How many do you have? How many locations, and how are you handling replication?
Yeah. So we have, I don't, man, like 16? A lot. For us, that's a lot. We're still handling replication a couple different ways. One is through Pressstore? Yeah, Pressstore. Yeah, it's a really good sync mechanism. And then a couple of them are cron job rsyncs between servers because they're in the same data center and there was no point in doing that. And we have a couple, in between the 2 Mac Minis, we use Bombitch's, there you go, Carbon Copy Cloner, yeah. Just because it's cheap and it's awesome and it works. And so you just have one copy of the entire Casper share to the other, so if one ever goes down, they're a clone of each other.
Do you guys do snapshots of your VMs? Are they JDSs or FTPs?
They're all distribution points, they're not JDSs, and I do snapshots on all of my VMs before we upgrade.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just to kind of add to the whole distribution point thing, what are your thoughts on using cloud storage? Because that's how we've moved to that. We've noticed with our slower WAN links that it's improved the speed in which our clients are able to get their packages. So what are y'all's thoughts on that?
So the big thing for us about using cloud is basically it's the speed of your internet link. So you're going to have a client on the same LAN as your server. You're going to look up to like a gig connection to pull down content. But then it depends on how your network architecture is built. So again, talking about this poor guy in Japan that I keep mentioning, he's on a 1 meg link to the office in Hong Kong, which is on a 10 meg link to the office in London, kind of thing. So, and even for his internet connection, sorry, so he's in Japan on a 1 meg link to Hong Kong, and then like a 100 meg breakout from Hong Kong. And the fun thing about the cloud stuff is, you guys think it's cloud, it's out there, but it is still local. So you have to worry about I mean, I think the S3 JSS stuff is the distributed. It's does like some DNS round robin or something.
Yeah,
Yep.
we use the stack, the full stack.
So the JSS S3 stuff does like the full stacks as DNS round robin, but you might want to. It's still a consideration where you're in Hong Kong and then maybe the JSS isn't that local. And again, it's that internet link. Your internet link is never going to be as quick as your, well, I hope it's never going to be as quick almost than what your internal LAN's going to be. You know, you're not going to get gig internet. And so you want to look at those DPs and having them synced in time. Now, to Drew's point, we use, so yeah, I said we're like a small environment, 230 max. We have 12 Mac Minis out there. With one site we've got 3, and we load balancing them. But we have 12 Mac Minis, and we use basically an rsync script to replicate on a Saturday the Casper share. It also does our netboot folder as well. So we put a netboot image in, and then the following week it's deployed out to Hong Kong or whatever. And we also change the time when our ASUS updates. We've got it cascaded. So we've got our master ASUS, and our clients will pop that up as well. So I suppose the thing is, it's bandwidth is key, whichever way you look at it, either from client to JSS, or from distribution point or secondary JSSs to your master JSS as well. So if your environment in the cloud might work for you. But for us, I know that in the consideration we have with our network, it would not work for us in quite a lot of cases. So we've had to take a step back and, Mac Mini server, they were even about $1,000, about £1,000 and it was almost a kind of throwaway, great little boxes do a single job. With the JSS, you set up your network segments, and you can do the failover distribution points as well. So I say it's key getting all that in place so that you can upgrade a JSS on a site, and then it's going to fall over to the right place. That keeps your network guy happy, and then maybe he'll buy you a beer later on.
Quick question about thoughts on at what point, once you have two JSS running, when do you spin up new instances of a JSS versus if you're virtualized, just throw more processors and RAM at existing JSSs? Is there a point that Tomcat becomes unstable that you guys are aware of, or any point that you should really look at another instance behind the load balancer versus just throwing more RAM and CPU power in the VM?
So you're asking how do you become aware of the point in time you have to add another Tomcat? Yeah.
What's the ceiling for Tomcat? So if he has unlimited RAM to apply to a server, do we keep applying RAM to that server to Tomcat, or do we start splitting out into other servers and spreading the load out a little bit more?
Gotcha, yeah. So basically the first step would be to split the services, right? And you get MySQL in one box, Tomcat in the other. Is there a ceiling to Tomcat? I'm sure there is, but you're probably going to hit a bottleneck in the database first. And if you're in a virtualized environment, cloning a Tomcat VM is pretty easy. So once you've separated the services, and VM solutions generally have some kind of metrics data you can use to back up of how much hardware and RAM and disk I/O I'm using. You can use those metrics and trend them over time, and you can kind of see where the health and performance of your VM is, and then just clone it. And that's probably the easiest way to scale out. I mean, you can clone out VMs pretty quickly these days.
And if we are speaking theoretically about it, as we increase RAM to Tomcat, we're also then theoretically going to be able to increase the number of connections that Tomcat can take in. As we increase the number of connections that Tomcat can take in, we also have to increase the thread pool for Tomcat. I don't have a hard rule or hard data off the top of my head. We'd probably have to take a look at the CPU to see what's going to happen as we increase connections due to the RAM, as we increase those threads, what's going to happen to the CPU compared to the threads. So there could be some hardware limitations as far as that goes. We'd have to look at the specific hardware that we're dealing with at that point in time to see if there's a ceiling there. That's all very theoretical without knowing exactly what the hardware is going to be. And also that's all predicated by how many connections do we want to handle simultaneously. So those factors are going to lead into it. I think Andrew said that earlier, knowing how many clients we have, how frequently those connections are going to come in, at least an estimate on that based on utilization is going to help us get there. So I'm sure there's a ceiling for Tomcat. My gut feeling is it's probably related to more the threads and the connections than it's going to be anything else. So we could probably get you a harder answer if we know what the hardware is that we're working with there. But those are going to be a couple of things that I'm going to want to take a look at.
Yeah, and kind of just to follow up on what Dusty just said, like we don't have any magic numbers we can give you, but we can give you a formula, so to speak, and we can kind of follow that logic in the formula, and from there we can pretty much, tell you this is a good place to start, and then, over time with your data that you trend from your VM performance tools, you'll be able to get those magic numbers and get those tweaks, right?
Hi again. We've talked a lot about load balancing Tomcat, but the one thing I think is lacking is, on the reliability point of view, there doesn't seem to be much documentation on clustering SQL servers, and I was just wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that.
That's easy. So currently, clustering MySQL is not supported. So, no. The only type of replication is master-slave, and you'd definitely want to talk to support about that one. From my experience, before you get once you get to a certain size, it might make sense to start looking at InnoDB instead of MySAM as how MySQL's running and what your tables are, but that has its own complexity and does change a lot of things, and you have to really be comfortable with your database team and make sure that everything's going to be okay.
Speaking of databases, what are the plans in terms of whether it's going to be staying on MySQL or if there will be support for other platforms like Postgres? Or
Well, Dusty answer that.
The answer to that is I don't have an answer. It's going to be a development kind of thing. The best thing we can do there is feature requests. And I say that in every single class that I teach. It's not to put the question off, not to downplay it at all. Put the feature requests in. I'm pretty sure there's feature requests out there for that already. So what I would say to that is go in and vote it up. If you take a look at the feature requests on Jamf Nation, what you're going to see is the ability to vote. You're also going to notice if you sort feature requests by most votes, you're going to see that the ones with the most votes typically are the ones that are implemented or planned. You're also going to see responses from the lead developers. You're going to see responses from Zach. You're going to see responses from the product managers. So if that's something that is a need in your environment, please go in, vote that up, give it your voice, and make sure that you back that so that the development team and product management team knows that it's something that we need to get some weight behind. So sorry to give you a non-answer on that one.
just a follow-up question on the database topic. Love to hear if anybody has experience running databases in some of the cluster environments like RDS or cloud databases in Rackspace, and what kind of experience you've had with that.
I've dealt with a few customers that have been AWS, like fully AWS hosted with VPSs, and it works just like a server. So if you're willing to pay for the hardware, for the VPS, and the bandwidth, it acts just like an on-prem. It's just in the cloud. So like the MySQL doesn't change if it's on-premise or in cloud. It's just, it depends if if you want to go cloud, like you'll have to just, kind of just buy that cloud service, or we can host it for you. So does that answer your question? Oh, sorry.
No.
Okay.
I was specifically referring to clustered database services as opposed to an isolated DBS. So, for example, Amazon RDS, which is a clustered database.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if that works. I don't think it does. No? No. Okay.
Yeah, so no. It's going to be the short one on that. Yeah, it's just going to be a function of what we currently support. Since we don't currently support that, there's not going to be a lot of an answer up here. Definitely something that if we want to further that question, we could probably send it over to the team that takes care of the Jamf Cloud instances. I think they've been running around. Is that Luis? Awesome, cool. So catch me after here, and I'll get you introduced to them. We can see if we get you a better answer there. Perfect. Oh, all the way up top.
One sec.
Oh, it's one of them.
I got him first. Are you on his? All right, sounds good. There you go, buddy.
Hey, I'm the actual database administrator for the online services team. We are using RDS for any of the hosted instances out there, so it does work. There's plenty of complexity that goes into that, and then kind of like Dusty had said, we have a booth set up over by Pro Services. So if you want to get some more information, I'd recommend swinging over by us after the session, and we can kind of chat in a little more detail there. But it does work. That's exactly what we're using. So.
Back to the max packet thread size, is there any chance you guys can post that formula online because it's not there?
It is up on Jamf Nation. It's just part of a thread. It's not an official KB yet. I probably have it bookmarked somewhere. I can find that link and pass it on to Dusty to get posted up somewhere.
Cool.
Yeah, just to that, I actually have a slide that I was going to show right towards the end here. Anything that we do have as far as resources that come up, so Amanda will be able to make that available. On the session page on Jamf Nation for the Jamf Nation User Conference, I have that discussion there. There's also going to be a resources page available there, so we'll look to make that available for you there. Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I have to pull my phone out. I forgot my iPad at the office, so we'll go ahead and take a look. I'm not actually checking text messages here, so we'll go ahead and take a look at what those questions are.
So I just wanted to say something else while Dusty's looking on his iPhone.
Yeah.
Are you guys looking at scaling the JSS because of the device count or because of new acquisitions in different countries? Okay, maybe. Hands up if you're looking at it for device count. And hands up for other countries. Okay? So the big issue for us, like I said, we're quite a small environment really. But when you're looking at other countries and you look at things like VPP and DEP, they may not be available in the territory you're working in. So it all sounds great and lovely. You guys talk about it. You guys are based in the US. You have this lovely stuff that you can do. But, I mean, it's taken almost a year for VPP to be available in Hong Kong, so, for instance. So there are ways around it. I've got a blog post on MacMule, VPP 2.0, and a question of morality, because we do something that is questionably legal in regards to VPP. But everybody I've spoke to at Apple has not got a better solution for us. So we deploy our apps using our the couple of apps that we manage using our institutional Apple ID to all of our Macs that we manage. Because if you look at the wording of some of the agreement, it's the Macs that you manage. You can potentially do that from the account. So we can do that from the UK. So that does mean that Macs in Hong Kong, Macs in New York are using apps that are deployed from the UK App Store. So it is a big grey area. It's not potentially legal. You've got to obviously speak to your legal teams and make sure everybody's happy. But we didn't have a way around deploying these apps because we couldn't look at VPP and start doing distribution like that to our Macs out in Hong Kong and a few other sites where VPP wasn't available. Another thing being we're not involved as IT, my part of IT, we don't deal with new starters. So new starters are done through an automated process. The HR actually do it, which I think some of you guys might do as well. So our Macs are ready for anybody to log into, as long as they've got a valid AD account. So we can't look at VPP invitations and things like that, and especially if it's someone, maybe a new starter in New Zealand, which is about 14 hours ahead from where we are. I may be asleep, I may be posted on Jamf Nation, but generally I'm not going to be in the office. So it's the timing of things and the offering of these new kind of models from Apple can it's just something to bear in mind when you're working these multiple territories, because it might look shiny, lovely, new, and awesome, but it might be US only. So it's just definitely something to look at.
Cool, and I'm going to grab these 2 questions. Was that Nick? Right? Yeah, awesome. Nick, thank you for pointing that out. I didn't realize how close we were on time. So the first question I wanted to get to here, I don't know how to say that username. Roygat, maybe? Sorry if I got that wrong. Would you recommend distribution points to use AFP or SMB? It seems like SMB connections are slower on Macs.
I prefer AFP. However, I'd really go with HTTP if for all your policies and all your distribution points. There's just a lot of the auto resumable downloads is really nice, or the resumable downloads, and then for imaging, AFP.
Awesome, thank you. And then the other question that we had that was posted, what is the best way to handle the Casper admin conflicts when we have multiple administrators at multiple locations? On many occasions, someone will leave Casper admin open and then leave. Someone else at another location will then open it up to add a package or make some other changes. When the person who left it open comes back and closes Casper admin, the changes the prior person made are overwritten. In this particular case, they have about 10 SMB distribution points using DFSR, Replication, and are currently going with JDS. Are there any plans to allow full administration through the web interface? Is there something already in place that I may not be aware of?
Here you go. It's your turn.
And Mikey, you have 1 minute.
So I'll be quick and not talk too fast. Yes, that is a known thing with Casper admin, with multiple admins doing it at the same time. Always best recommendation, do your work, save often, quit it when you're done. We are progressively adding more and more to the web interface to be able to do that. Now, our current way of having the web upload is using a master, your master is a JDS. That is the current only way to do that. We're always open for more discussion. We're looking at other ways. We are looking to find better ways to make Casper admin not have those problems. But as it stands, Casper admin, train your people, do your work, save off, and quit. Use Casper admin for your uploads, quit, and you can actually do most of the actual other modifications, the notes, the priorities, all those other, fill user template, all those other settings are all accessible from the web interface. So if you can train your people as it stands to just use Casper admin for the upload, save it when they're done, quit it when they're done, and then step out of it, you will run into less of those problems.
Awesome, thank you. We're running out of time. What I'm going to ask is if you could please post your question to the discussion. I'm going to give homework to the panelists. We're going to go on and try to answer those questions from the discussion. Last couple bits of housekeeping here. I just wanted to point out again, we'll look to post any resources we talked about to the resources page. So Amanda, if you could take care of posting the resources that you had mentioned. And then other panelist sessions that I wanted to point out. So we have a couple of panelists up here who are going to be doing some other sessions for us. So Jehan has one on the JSS API. You can check that out tomorrow afternoon, looks like. Yep, Thursday. And then Ben Toms also has a session tomorrow, and it's largely going to be focused around the Auto Casper MDI and the net install creator. So what I want to do right now is, first and foremost, I want the panelists to give the audience a round of applause for their questions. All right, thank you guys. And then thank you guys for coming. Thank you for actually making this work. We can't do a panel discussion without your questions. So go on about your day, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you had a good time.